How to locate rational numbers on a number line or draw them on a number line is what I will be sharing with you in Chapter 1, Lesson 1, Part 2. Locating decimals on a number line. So first, the first step you'll always have to take is to determine what two whole numbers your decimal is between by evaluating the digits to the left of the decimal. So we have an example here of -2 3/4. -2 is to the left of the decimal. So this is between -2 and -3 on the number line. So I would start by just graphing a number line with the whole numbers. Remember, when dealing with negative numbers, we're working backwards. You want to try and make your spaces as even as possible between the digits. But again, unless you're using a ruler, it's not going to look perfect, just as mine did not. So step 3 is to divide the distance between the integers into equal segments. Since we are dealing with the decimals, we had -2.34. We are going to divide it into 10. So I'm going to narrow this number line down now from between -2 and -3. I don't need anything to the left or right of it. So because I have to break it up into 10 spaces, I'm going to be drawing 9 lines. Again, try and split it up as evenly as possible when you have to draw your own. And mine got a little crunch there at the end. No big deal, but we want to make it as accurate of a representation. And then I can start labeling those spots. So -2.1, -2.2, -2.3, -2.4, -2.5, -2.6, -2.7, negative, I'll write it up here just for space, and -2.9. So now we're going to try and plot our point as accurately as possible. Because we have -2.34, I can determine that this number is going to be in between -2.3 and -2.4. Since my next digit is a 4, I know I'm a little bit closer to the 2.3 side than if it were a 5 or higher. If you really wanted to, you could break this number line down even more and have your -2.3 over here and your -2.4 here, and break all of this down into 10 spaces. And like this would be -2.35. And that would be -2.34. That would be the most accurate way to do it, but I will totally accept anything that looks like this up here. We're just making general approximations. All right, if you have a proper fraction on a number line, again, that's something where we have a numerator that is smaller than the denominator. We know that it's always going to be between 0 and 1. So the first step would be to draw your number line and 0, 1. If it were a -3/4, like our example, we would have it between 0 and -1. So again, anytime you have a proper fraction where your whole number, where your numerator is smaller than your denominator, you can just start by graphing that line between 0 and 1. So when we have our number line between 0 and 1, we're going to use the denominator of our fraction, so in this case 4, to tell us how many spaces that our number line will be broken up into. So because we have 0 and 1 here, and our denominator was 4, it said break your number line up into 4 spaces. Again, I had to draw 3 lines to do so. And then I just go along and label it with my denominator as 1/4, This would have been 2/4, but I simplified it to 1/2, and then 3/4. And lastly, plot your point right there on your number line. How to locate an improper fraction on a number line. An improper fraction is when your numerator is larger than your denominator. So example, 15/4. Just a little extra step here. We want to turn that into a proper fraction or a mixed number by dividing our numerator by our denominator. So 15 divided by 4, that goes in 3 times. It's 12. We're left with 3. So that becomes 3 3/4. So that whole number now tells us what two integers it lies in between. Since it's 3 and it's larger than 3, we know it's going to go between 3 and 4. So now we'll just follow the same steps on the last page. Again, I'll start out by just graphing my 3 and my 4 instead of the 0 and 1. And because my denominator is 4, I'm breaking it up into 4 spaces. So this first line would be 3 1/4. This would be 3 1/2, because 3 2/4 simplifies. And this would be 3 3/4. So then you can plot your point right there. Okay, so here we have a couple examples. Find the integers that the rational numbers lie between. We have -1/5 and 10/4. -1/5 is negative and it's proper. So it's located between 0 and -1. Again, any proper fraction will be located between 0 and 1 if it's positive, and 0 and -1 if it's negative. 10/4 is an improper fraction right now. So in order to tell what two integers it lies between, you have to turn it into a mixed number. They did the long division for you, but if you need a reminder, 10 divided by 4 is 2. 4 goes into 10 2 times. 4 times 2 is 8. Subtract, bring down that 2. So this becomes 2 2/4, which they simplified to 2 1/2 for you. So because it's positive, I know since my whole number is 2, it's going to be between 2 and 3. So I can graph a number line to label these integers. I know I need to have a -1 as my lowest point. So this would be 0, 1, 2, and 3. This way I'll be able to graph both my -1/5, which would be about here, and my 2 1/2 would lie right about there. They go even further on the next page. We divided the distance between -0 and 1 into 5 equal segments because our denominator was 5. So here we had 0. This would be -1/5, -2/5, -3/5, -4/5, and that's where -1 lies. Again, right about where I put it, right here. And then the distance between 2 and 1/3, I'm just dividing into 2 equal segments. This was 0, 1, 2, 3. I divided it into 2 equal segments because my fraction was 2 1/2. I had that denominator of 2. So again, this is where 10/4 would be if I write it in the original term they gave it, and -1/5. Here I'm just filling in the other spots of the number line that they left blank. Here we can do one more practice problem where they don't give us all the lines, but first let's deal with -5/8. -5/8 is proper and negative. So I know it's going to be between 0 and -1 on the number line. 2.2 is a decimal, which makes it a little easier for us. So I'm going to look at that whole number. So now I know that it's going to lie between 2 and 3. I'm going to draw a number line that will accommodate all of those numbers. So I need to have -1 as my lowest. And it looks like 3 as my highest. So -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Now -5/8 I know is going to go somewhere in here because it's negative. So I'm going to divide this into 8 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Again, not perfect, ran out of room. It's all right. And then I can locate by just counting -1/8, -2/8, -3/8, -4/8, -5/8. 2.2, because this decimal is in the tenths place, to locate this properly, I need to split it up into my 2 and 3 here into 10 spaces. So when dealing with that, you can mark that middle one. That'll help you be a little more even too. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I would have 2.1 here and 2.2 here. Again, when with dealing with number lines, I don't expect everything to look perfect. If the practice work gives you a number line with marks dashed, it needs to be in the right spot. But if you're drawing your own, just make sure your labels are there so I can tell it's correct.